Welcome all. I'm joined today by Edele Hovnanian, the president of the Hrair Hovnanian Foundation, founder of Birthright Armenia, and president of Hovnanian Industries. We'll be discussing Edele's years-long philanthropic work in Armenia, her family's legacy, and plans for the future. So, Ms. Hovnanian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
To start off, I want to talk a little bit about your father, Hrair Hovnanian, who sadly passed away. He had 3 brothers. Altogether, there are 4.
And 2 sisters.
And 2 sisters. So, you know, he was a very private individual, but he was really galvanized and really conducted multiple projects in Armenia. Can you tell us a bit more about your father? You worked with your father for 30 years, conducting all this work.
As you said, my father was very private, and you know, all of the brothers have very big personalities in their own way, and each of them found their own little niche within the Armenian philanthropic community in the United States, and some of them in Armenia. But they always were very clear to make them their focus very distinct. And so the older brothers had projects. One of them was very involved in the diocesan far, and one was very involved in a Philadelphia school. And then my father's youngest brother, Vahag, followed my father here to Yerevan and created Vahakni. After years of focusing on a school, a Hovnanian school in North Jersey. My father, who is very private and probably less well known in Armenia, was very involved in the Armenian Assembly. And you know, was raised very Armenian. He was from Iraq, and he really believed that it was very important for him to instill a sense of obligation to the Armenian community worldwide. I mean, my childhood in an independent Armenia did not exist, and so he at some point had a conversation with me. I worked with him for many years, and that, you know, what am I going to do with my money? He probably was about 70 and was like, what is this all for? And we had decided that, you know, putting all his money and his net worth into the foundation, and not, you know, he didn't leave anything to us, but we're fine. And, you know, and then the challenge came of you know, he has now, we're moving about $500 million of his money into a foundation, of which half is dedicated to the Armenian people, and trying to find a way to spend that money on projects that has the greatest impact to the people of Armenia in this country and worldwide, and figuring that out. And luckily I'm surrounded by an amazing staff, and we're just at the beginning of that. I've just started. I'm still involved very much in running the family businesses. So, but I brought the 3rd generation in, and I've been mentoring him for 3 years. And so, within about 2 years, I'm hoping to focus full-time on the foundation. So, you know, I'm a planner. I always have a 5-year plan for myself. So my goal is to make sure that I institutionalize this foundation, which will live on for my lifetime and beyond, to make it easy for future generations to be able to spend this money that's allocated to the Armenian people in the most impactful way possible. And just figuring it out, for trying to listen to people I respect, you know, around here and around the world, and getting their input as what they think they would do if they were in my shoes. And so we'll see.
I mean, the Hovnanian family is a big family as
well. It's a big family, but the foundation that does almost all of the projects in Armenia is the Hrair Hovnanian Foundation. It's the Hrair Hovnanian Family Foundation. We changed the name 3 years before Dad died, because I and some of my siblings started putting our money into the foundation also, and we realized that it was going to be a multi-generational thing, and our goal obviously is to grow it substantially beyond $500 million if we can. So I don't know, and we're very conscious of what happened to the Gulbenkian Foundation, and a very small percentage of the Gulbenkian money now comes to the Armenian people. And so we went out of our way to meet with lawyers to try to anticipate that, you know, 200-300 years from now, that's not going to happen to the Hrair Hovnanian Foundation, that the Armenian people will be guaranteed that they must get 50% of the proceeds from this foundation every year. So we modified his will to ensure that it can't be taken over by Odars or other people. So hopefully we've been smart enough that hundreds of years from now, what happened to the Hovnanian Foundation won't happen to our foundation.
And Hrair Hovnanian and yourself, there's a slew of projects, initiatives that you and your family have been involved in. How would you guys select or try and come up with which projects you wanted to direct your efforts towards?
I believe if you don't want to make this a job and a burden, because you're not making money, so it has to be something you're passionate about. So the first thing about 18 years ago or so, when I was financially secure and I myself wanted to make my mark on the Armenian community, I wanted to give back. I remember that I'd experienced after I graduated college, before I went to Wall Street, I decided I wanted to learn Armenian. So I applied to the Soviet embassy to spend a year here in Soviet Armenia. And it was very challenging, very few Americans, no one spoke English, there's no cell phones or way to communicate with the United States. And so it was a total immersion experience. And I remember the process of not being able to understand their humor, the way they think, and then just slowly just becoming one of them. From the simplest thing, like when I arrived and there would be a long line of people waiting for something, and I'd just stand at the end of the line saying, "What are you waiting for?" And they'd say, "I don't know." And I'd be like, "Okay, these people are stupid." And then 5 months later, I'd see a line, I'd get behind it. Because I learned if I don't need it, I can give it to a relative, I can sell it, whatever. And so I truly got to understand them. So when I graduated, so that's what I did when I graduated. And so when I was able to start my own project, my one wish was that every Armenian diasporan could experience Armenia the way I did. And the problem with independence was that everyone was coming as a tourist, but they're sitting in their Marriott hotel and drinking their Heineken beers and visiting the Vanks and thinking they would come and they would give the Yerevansis a lot of advice, and then they get on their Air France flight and fly home. And I just started seeing very slowly how the diaspora, in the first years of independence, was very much connected with with the country and saw the locals saw us as saviors. And then after years of kind of you come and leave and I still am sitting here in the dark, they realized, like, what, we don't need your advice, we're on our own, zamuna yev korzadzvad hakusnere betchunin, kind of thing. So I started seeing a disconnect. And then this man I respect very much, Tom Samuelian, had written as part of Armenia 2020 a vision of what the future of Armenia and the diaspora would be if there was that disconnect. And he kind of went through a few scenarios. And it was pretty scary for me to see that there was the possibility that we could have our diasporan institutions and define ourselves as Armenian without having a connection with the country. And so that's when I said, we need to get kids here, living with families, working side by side with locals over longer periods of time to truly see it a different way. And so we connected with the Birthright Israel people, and of course they had $300 million and they had this 10-day very curated experience, and I knew that wasn't what I wanted, but we got some great ideas. They were very helpful with us. And then I hired one of my dear friends, Linda Yapoyan, to do 2 years of focus groups within the Armenian community. And we came up with this concept that is now Birthright Armenia, which over the first few years we tweaked, and it's hitting its stride, and it's become almost an institution, even though it's fairly young. It's become like kind of a rite of passage, I think, which makes me very proud.
I mean, Birthright Armenia was how I started my own journey in Armenia, so thank you very much for that. And I mean, for our watchers who don't know, it's a volunteer internship program for young diasporan Armenians seeking to connect with the country. I found it to be a fantastic way to be introduced to the country. What was also interesting is that you meet young Armenians from everywhere. Yes. From Uruguay, from Palestine, from Russia, America. And looking at the room full of all these young diasporans, it almost felt like the embodiment of the diaspora.
Right, exactly.
Which was very interesting. And the organization has a new beautiful office in Gyumri. It's encouraging volunteers to go to cities like Vanadzor now. So it's expanding. I mean, what can you tell us about the future plans for Birthright Armenia? I don't know. I mean, I think right now it has so much potential. We have a few ideas I'm not necessarily willing to say because then the staff will hold me to it. But right now we can easily handle 250 volunteers a year. Average length of stay is about 3 to 4 months.
And so I want to cover a lot more regions of Armenia. I want to go south, and there's a few layers of components we want to add to encourage them to stay longer. I mean, I think that ultimately, our repatriation rate is slightly under 15%. And so my focus now is trying to get as many of those, whether they come through birthright or AVC, which is kind of like if you don't qualify, if you're not at least 25% Armenian and within a certain age bracket, you can still come and experience living in Armenia, and we'll place you in an internship, but you don't get all the bells and whistles you do if you qualify for birthright. And so I want as many of the Western thinking people to come into Armenia. I think that that's what ensures that Armenia stays democratic and the rule of law is maintained and things like that. So I'm kind of shifting to, my organization's kind of the batons pass from one to another. So there was an organization called Repat Armenia, which I was always very interested in. Repatriation's not quite a word because you're not a repat, you weren't born here, but that's what it's called. They were very small, and I just felt like it was just time. It was time. I was seeing it within Repat that there was a strong desire, if we could create a soft landing, that there a lot of people were considering it. And Armenia right now is very livable. So I've sort of taken on the growth of Repat because I want to make it substantially larger. And this year we pilot tested with the Lebanese and then also with Russian Armenians on bringing them here, providing them free headhunter services, providing them some housing, a stipend, travel reimbursement, and things like that to say, come here for 3 months, give it a shot, try to find a job, we'll help you find a job, and then you can bring your family here and whatever. So that's what I'm focused on, be it whether it's the birthright alumni or diasporans who just need a little bit of a push to consider Armenia because it's so livable. So that's something that I'm focused on, and I also get a lot from the birthright community that Yerevan has become so cosmopolitan that there's a desire to go outside. And so I'm trying to find some rural development projects that are like agricultural oriented, so that, whether it be like a kibbutz kind of environment or a commune, where we can offer you a different way of experiencing life in Armenia. So that's another alternative. And so I'm just trying to add layers onto the initial inspiration. They all kind of feed. The only project I've ever done that didn't feed into my passions was Hive. But sometimes Hive was a tech startup that we were basically an angel investor in a lot of Armenian startups. Sometimes I chase ideas when I find someone that inspires me. And so there's a woman, Nina Kuyumjan from San Francisco, who is a very senior venture capitalist, and she convinced me to let her lead this program, which I funded. Then COVID happened and things, so that's kind of been sidetracked a little bit, and so I haven't quite figured out what to do with it. But that's the one time I went a little outside of my comfort zone, and because I'm not technologically savvy, so I'm going to always try to find projects that kind of focus on the youth, be it youth in the diaspora and youth in Armenia. I need to do a little bit more on focusing on local NGOs and programs that, but I have to do my due diligence, and I have to get outside of Yerevan and go into all the regions. So that's just one of the things that I've put on my to-do list for the next year, is to figure out who are those worthwhile NGOs that are doing things that I should be investing in. So
it's quite a process. You have to be meticulous about it to find the ins and outs.
Well, okay. There's a very famous saying, I think, that one of the Rockefellers had said, where the art of philanthropy is really no different than the art of making money. It's business. And if, you can ask Sevan, my birthright executive director, the amount of reporting, statistics, tracking that I make them do every month is intense. I approach it like a business. I mean, just because the goal is not to make money doesn't mean that I shouldn't be monitoring the impact and forcing them to quantify it. So I'm a numbers person, and so I love spreadsheets with data that I can absorb and see if we're on the right track. And so something that I've instilled on all my nonprofits, which is, it's just not a matter of me writing a check. I will be very involved in ensuring that in my mind, if I'm going to do, a small check, I'll write it and move on. But a big check, I want to be involved to make sure that you can use my business training to your advantage to make sure that you are having the greatest impact, and you can measure that impact. I mean, one of the things that frustrated me when I joined REPAT was they had no ability to measure their impact. And if you can't measure impact, how do you know how much to invest? So, so it's, I don't know. I think I drive a lot of people crazy, but.
I also want to give a shout out to Hike Armenia as well.
Oh, that's a passion of mine.
Which is doing great work in promoting hiking in Armenia, and obviously Armenia has a massive potential when it comes to hiking. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, I want to tell you two things. One is that besides the fact that I love hiking and I think it's a beautiful way to see the country and get out of the city, it also is a way to encourage money to be spent by tourists outside of Yerevan. And you spend $10 on a bed and breakfast in a little cure somewhere in the outskirts of this country, and it has a much greater impact than spending $10 in a cafe here. And we're in the process of mapping what we're going to call the Armenian National Trail, a 30-day trail that you can do without tents, okay, from the very northern tip of Armenia to the southern tip of Armenia. And so we're GPSing it and assessing it this year. Next year we'll map it, we'll mark it and maintain the trails or create the trails. And I think hopefully we'll launch it in 2024.
Okay, and also in terms of philanthropy work, comparing it now in 2022, what was it like in the beginning? What had changed in Armenia with regards to conducting this sort of work?
Well, Armenia at the beginning was, the entire country was a project. I mean, there was just literally nowhere where, your money couldn't benefit the people. And it's, the problem with someone like my father and I is that, that saying where you can give someone a fish and then you feed them for a day, and you give them a fishing pole and you feed them for their lifetime. We very much believe in, we will give people fishing poles. And so in the beginning it was very hard because they needed the fish to survive that day. But it was very difficult to invest in longer term vision projects when people were, in the dark, hungry, no jobs. And so it was, kind of a little bit of a crisis management. And then as soon as we felt like there were other organizations that were handling the day-to-day, the soup kitchens, the children without eyeglasses, whatever those projects were, we pivoted to what we felt suited us, which was more of the longer term impact projects. But at the beginning it was very challenging.
And finally, I want to end on a sort of sour note.
Okay.
Obviously, the 2020 Karabakh War ended in an Armenian military defeat. But, as someone who has invested physically, emotionally in Armenia, you and your father saw the Armenia of the early 90s, of the post-earthquake Armenia, the post-First War Armenia, and many are drawing parallels between the post-2020 war period and that period. I've also found that when you return to Europe or America, there are some young Armenian diasporans now that are almost weary. They're not quite sure what the situation is like in Armenia, whether they should invest their time and efforts in Armenia. Having seen that period, that initial period of crisis in Armenia, what would your message be to young diasporans that maybe are thinking that Armenia is going through a rough time at the moment?
Well, if you're looking for an excuse not to come, there's always one. The earthquake was if not now, when? There's never going to be a perfect time. The country is definitely going through the post-shock of the outcome of that war. You can be a part of the history and the future of this country by participating now. I often hear, it's just, there's always, and for 30 years, I've heard reasons that it wasn't a good time. In the 90s, there's no electricity, things are difficult, whatever. There's always a reason why. And then, COVID was a reason. But the country lives on, and our country is in desperate need of, constantly reforming itself to be the country that it has the potential to be. And so you either want to be a part of it or you don't. And so I don't accept, you thought you're harsh, I'm harsh. I don't accept excuses. The country is here, it's moving forward. I don't mind criticism, because to me, you criticize Armenia means you care. I would be more concerned if they just stopped caring about Armenia and not criticizing. So I'm okay with criticism, but then come here and be a part of it. And Find your niche of where you can make your mark in this country. And I might, because of my situation, make a bigger mark, but every single person I've met, now each of you are making your mark, and then you're having your own echo within your surrounding environment that you've created here. And the impact of that is going to change this country if we can get more of you here. And so I don't accept sitting back in the diaspora and thinking that you are a good Armenian, but yet you criticize Armenia and don't want to participate in solving the problems. If you want to come here and protest, you can come here and protest. I have no issue, but that means you care. But to use that as an excuse not to engage, I have a problem with, because there's never a perfect time. This country it's transforming itself, and this was a hurdle. I don't blame it on any one political member or party. I think it was a process that we had ignored for a long time, and we faced the facts. I've heard Armenians are great at conspiracy theories. So there's some of the things I've heard this week are mind-boggling, if even one of them were true. So I don't know. I think that there's so much potential. It breaks my heart. I mean, I have friends like James Tufankin whose entire philanthropic focus was on Artsakh. And I don't even know how they wake up the next day and keep going. They inspire me because my focus was much more in the boundaries of Armenia. But I will tell you this, so I was here in April of last year when my father died. And mind you, he was not born in this country, he was born in Iraq. And one of his last things he said to me was, don't be the generation that sees the birth and death of a nation in their lifetime. Like, don't take Armenia for granted. We have a country, you have to fight to keep it. And he said this while the war was going on. He was luckily old enough and out of it enough that he didn't understand the outcome of the war, because I think that would have killed him that day if he had found out, and it would have killed him 5 months earlier. But I think that I know that he was aware of the war was going on, and it was bad, and he was worried about it. And literally, instead of saying, you're my daughter, I love you, he literally to the last day was lecturing on my sense of obligation to this country. So it was pounded into me. He didn't want to lose this last breath. It was his focus. So we bear that torch proudly. I think that amazingly, the third generation. Absolutely have no doubt that his grandchildren will carry the torch. After that, I have no idea. So I feel confident. So in the lifetime that I see, in the span of life that I see, that the Hrair Hovnanian's children and grandchildren will make an impact and will not walk away from Armenia.
Okay, well, Ms. Hovnanian, thank you very much
Absolutely.
for your time.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.